Hi there, this is John Wilkinson again from History Made Easier, looking at the fact that the Paris Peace Treaties were a compromise between the big three. Why am I looking at this? Well, quite simply because it matters. It matters because it shows how different their aims were. It matters because it meant none of the leaders got what they or their people really wanted. And it matters more than anything else because it led to weaknesses in the treaties. Well, what was the compromise? Ultimately, it was between President Wilson and Prime Minister Clemenceau. Between the fair and lasting peace, the peace without victory that Wilson sought, and the vengeance that Clemenceau and the French nation sought, and to Clemenceau's understandable desire to make France secure from another German attack. France had been attacked twice by Germany in his lifetime, and at great cost, and France and Germany shared a long border. But how to make France secure? Lloyd George, although he had promised the British people that he would make Germany pay, was worried that a harsh treaty would leave Germany wanting its own revenge. He also thought that trade with Germany would make Britain more financially secure. There are different ways of looking at what makes a country secure. And so I suppose we can say Lloyd George made his own compromise. So, was the Treaty of Versailles too much of a compromise? Were the treaties as a whole too much of a compromise? The treaty was harsh, if not as harsh as the French wanted. It seemed that Germany was no longer a military threat, so long as France wasn't pressured to demilitarize in the future. Though France had in fact wanted an even smaller German army. The demilitarization of the Rhineland also put France in a much stronger position vis-à-vis Germany. For at one and the same time, it made it much harder for Germany to invade France, but much easier for France to march into Germany, which it did, of course, in 1923. And France had, or thought it had, the Anglo-American guarantee. But at the same time, the scale of German territorial losses and the reparations it was obliged to pay would mean that Germany would not recover any time soon, or so it seemed. But Germany hadn't been crippled as much as France had hoped. It hadn't been broken into smaller states as Poincaré had wanted. And the fact that the Rhineland remained a part of Germany was a particular disappointment to the French. They would, at the very least, have liked the Rhine to have become the natural border between themselves and Germany. Clemenceau had only agreed to compromise on the Rhine as a border because the Anglo-American guarantee offered additional security. But this would not in fact materialize. When the American Senate failed to ratify the treaty, the British guarantee was annulled along with the American. Also, without America, the League of Nations was weakened from the start. Never mind the fact that France had wanted it to have an army. But there's another big point. Future politicians allowed the terms of the treaty to be compromised. The disarmament conference really left the door open for Germany to rearm. There was the Anglo-German naval agreement too. And Hitler remilitarized the Rhineland and joined Germany with Austria, without anything being done to stop him. And German reactions must have left Lloyd George fearing the worst. Of course, we should note Germans' horror when they saw the amount of reparations they were to pay, and the territory they were forced to give up. Where was the principle of self-determination? The hurt pride as their military power was dismantled. But at the heart of German anger was the fact that they seemed to have been cheated, betrayed by President Wilson, with whom they had mostly negotiated their request for an armistice on the basis of his 14 points and the promise of an honourable peace. Hadn't he said that the Allies were not waging war against the German people, but against Kaiserism and Prussian militarism? Well, the Kaiser had gone, Prussian militarism too. But here they were, faced with a dictated peace based on a guilt clause that they felt was utterly unfair. They were outraged. There was not a German who could accept what had happened to their country. It didn't seem to be a fair and just peace, nor a lasting peace. And let me just pick some key points out of the other peace treaties. Were countries all as guilty as each other? Was Bulgaria or Turkey or even Hungary as guilty or responsible as Austria or Germany, or Russia for that matter? As for reparations, that every nation found it difficult to pay them, impossible in some cases, it suggests that they were set far too high. Bulgaria's reparations bill was quite staggering. 2.25 billion gold francs to be paid over 37 years. In relation to its national wealth, its reparation payments were the highest of all the defeated powers. And in addition, Bulgaria had to hand over large quantities of railway stock, coal and livestock to Romania, Greece and Yugoslavia. Bulgaria would struggle throughout the interwar period to come to terms with the provisions of the treaty. And what of self-determination? Austria was not allowed to join with Germany, while the carving out of the Austro-Hungarian Empire left 3 million ethnic Germans in the Sudetenland in the newly formed Czechoslovakia, and 250,000 ethnic Germans in the South Tyrol, now part of Italy, while 3 million Hungarians found themselves living in other states too. As for the Ottoman Empire, the spoils of war seemed to be handed to the victorious powers, with Syria, Iraq, Transjordan, essentially today's Jordan, Palestine and Lebanon, placed under British or French protection under League of Nations mandates. So much for a peace without victory. Of course, Turkey was so outraged that it led to another war and a revised treaty, the Treaty of Lausanne, and the League of Nations would have to deal with border disputes at Vilna, on the Greek-Bulgarian border, and with Italy. There would be war between Poland and Russia too. So, you can see that the compromise did really matter. It links with your League of Nations topic, and with the reasons behind World War II, not to blame everything on the treaties, mind. Now, let me remind you that I may have a tutorial slot available if you feel you would benefit from that. I will be focusing on your needs, be it helping you understand a topic better or helping you with exam skills, including your source paper. I can even help with your coursework, though only as a friendly guide. I can't actually get involved in what you write. Or you might think you'll benefit from sharing these tutorials with a friend. Swapping ideas is always a good thing. And as these are online tutorials, we can do that with a Zoom call. If you're interested, just get your parents to get in touch with me at historymadeeasier@gmail.com and we'll see if we can sort something out. I'll always be flexible with prices, so don't worry about costs, though I will have to have a slot available. Anyway, thank you so much for listening, and the very best of luck with your studies. Cheers.